Warning: this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. Serious, Redditors who live in secluded towns, what is the darkest thing that happened in your town but is kept secret? In the early 1990s, a town in my small county in the southern US had a fire in a chicken processing plant. When workers tried to escape, it became apparent that the fire exits and other exits had been locked. Dozens of people died around the exits in desperation in a town of around 2,000. Our state suppressed the investigation due to lobbies, and families received almost none of the compensation funds. Pretty sure there's a song about it. My mom told me this story once that back when she was growing up in a small farming community in Ohio, there was some kind of neighborhood party attended by a bunch of families with kids all around the same age. All the kids, including herself, had this like big slumber party in the basement. They wake up the next morning and one of the kids is found in the middle of the road, having been hit with a truck, but with his whole body zipped all the way up in his sleeping bag. None of the kids owned up to doing it, and the adults could never figure it out either. After a while people just started moving on with their lives and everyone pretty much forgot about it. Edit: I didn't mean for this get attention and I can't reply to all of you, so I'll just say, this would be in Salina, Ohio around 1972. If anyone can find sources on it, go for it. I did some googling and couldn't really come up with anything. And some of you I think are right. My mom said she probably thinks it was a prank that went terribly wrong. What the heck? I wouldn't say we live in a secluded town, but when my mother was in school her best friend got a job working for the sheriff. She later came to school and told them that the sheriff had been molesting her. She also began telling people about what they have been using the tunnels under the town for. The police supposedly had been filming child pornography. After that day she never made it home. She was found later naked, hog-tied and shot in the back of the head. No one could prove it, and the sheriff had been suspected of many things but nothing ever came of it. They just announced that there was a man seen in a white van abducting people, but her friends knew. Her family knows. This is Red Bluff, California, by the way. The tunnels were originally used by Chinese immigrants. They go through our main street and through Rio Street. They led to houses and some businesses, but they have been condemned. There are sensors down there though, so if you get in the police are right there to get you out. Edit: the little girl's name was Rochelle Ward and the sheriff supposedly responsible was Koenig, but he died years back of old age. Holy shit. This one gets me. This is why people are afraid to report their abusers. A cop was a child molester and it was widely known. He went with a group hunting in the woods and never came back. Not that I mind, but what was he thinking going group hunting into the woods despite being widely known as a pedo? Must have been suicidal. Several young boys, age 9-11, went missing in the village and it was suspected that a group of boys from the same school were responsible. They were heard talking about it on 2 occasions, about how they kill whoever they don't like. However, their parents apparently attested that they never let them out of sight outside of school hours. This group of kids was known for skipping school to sniff glue and drink alcohol, by the way, but their parents obviously denied it. Only one of the 6 missing kids was ever found, in a creek, with injuries like he was stoned to death. Police said he fell down the creek accidentally, though. This was about 20 years ago in Europe, by the way. Whoa, that is messed up, man. Shame that the parents didn't care about their kids. A father held his wife at gunpoint and threatened to shoot her in the head in front of their 7-year-old daughter. Went on a wild police chase. He still lives in the town. There also was another dad who abused his wife and their children. Still lives here as well. When my mom was growing up, a teacher and his wife were killed by an axe murderer. Someone broke into their house and killed them in the middle of the night. They found the husband in the house and the wife in the woods behind it, indicating that she tried to escape and was chased down. Really gruesome stuff. The attack was seemingly random, and they never caught the person responsible. My elementary school was named after the teacher, which wouldn't necessarily be morbid except for the fact that there was a dedication plaque that mentioned his murder. In an elementary school, the 90s were freaking wild. In the 80s and early 90s my town was run completely by dirty cops. Drugs were run by the cops and people who didn't do as they were told would go mysteriously missing and eventually, most of them, wind up dead. It took the feds to clean the place up and install a new set of clean cops. Edit: I've been getting a lot of questions about the Copland movie. I've never seen it, but I googled it and no, it's not there. I'm not gonna say the town name of where I'm from because it's an everyone knows everyone one of town. But I'm from a small town in California and still live there. This all happened before my time and I was told about it by people who lived through it. My best friend's dad being one of them. They're a tiny town in New Mexico a couple years back whose whole police force was dirty. One day they were arrested on various charges and the only law enforcement official left was the police dog. Probably that old guy who had like 8 children. Sexually assaulted 2 of his daughters. Raped his stepdaughter multiple times. Getting her pregnant and completely mentally impaired in the process. Also mentally and physically abusing the rest of his family. Letting one of his sons die from pneumonia because he refused him any treatment and in the end tried to force his wife to buy him the way out of prison. Ask anyone outside of my town and they will have never heard of him, but I remember him pretty clearly since I was also friends with one of his sons my age and almost the entirety of the rest of the family. I was at their house pretty often when I was younger until my parents forbid me from going there again. Because how I later found out around that time the first accusations became public since one of his daughters had moved out and reported everything to the police. Edit 1. A few more details. All this took place in the north of Germany in I think 2016. In a small town of around 3,000 people and there were only 2 very short newspaper articles about it, which my mum decided to put on our pinboard in the kitchen. It's still happening in my town. This specific event happened directly in my gated neighborhood. A member of a Russian gang got his house shot up before they went inside to finish the job. My wife saw them drag out the body. Organized crime bosses live in my town and the 2 neighboring towns. I live in NJ. Edit. Getting asked a lot about where exactly. Milburn, Westfield, Short Hills, Springfield. I live in one of those towns. That's all I feel comfortable saying lol. I'm from Bergen Co and Italian mob bosses used to live here in my town up until the 80s. Some reason mobsters love living in NJ. My town isn't very secluded but I think this still works. So there is this building that used to be a hotel and one day this guy shows up and he takes multiple trips going in and out with a bunch of equipment. They found him a little while later in his room. He had assembled an entire guillotine and cut his head off. Well, that's the first time I've ever done the mildly impressed how to a suicide story. I was delivered by a serial killer doctor. I don't remember all the details but he was killing patients in Canada. A family friend was super drunk. He was walking home and fell unconscious on the road at the bottom of a hill. Another family friend, small town so we all knew each other, was driving home late. He heard a thump and a crunch when he went over a hill. He got out of the car thinking he hit a wallaby or something. He instead found his friend dead. Everyone decided to forget what he did, because it really wasn't his fault. There was no way he could have seen him asleep at the bottom on the hill in the middle of the road. It was at such an angle that the headlights didn't spot him. It's a bit weird this has come up because I drove past a super drunk dude just a few hours ago on my way home from work. He was drunk and stumbling on the road. He fell over and lost a thong. Flip-flop to you Americans. I called the police and told them. They said they'd pick him up and take him home where he would be safe. Didn't want a repeat of what happened back in my hometown to happen to that random drunk guy. The daughter of divorced parents was raped to death by the mother's boyfriend. She was 6. Her father was contacting CPS and presenting evidence that the man was abusing his daughter under her mother's care. Nothing was done about it until she was life-flighted to Salt Lake where she died of her wounds, and early in the investigation the mother admitted to letting her boyfriend play with her. The worst part is that because the abuser/murderer was part of the tribe, all he had to do was stay on tribal lands to not be taken into custody. So while the long process of an FBI investigation and the FBI jumping the correct hoops to make an arrest on tribal land, this man walked freely as long as he was on the reservation. Most people rejected the abuser/murderer entirely, but what hurt more is seeing the people who went out of their way to help him. His family tried to open a food truck where the highway passes through the res so he could have a job. It earned a large protest considering the size of the town, and few out-of-towners stopped for tacos. So they fortunately had to shut down. The man's cousin was chief, so he was given a job in the dispensary. Some other members of the tribe who worked there walked out on the job and went to the council to try and stop it. Fortunately, as of now, the FBI has taken the mother and boyfriend into custody and they're awaiting trial. I've been called for jury duty twice now and it's been cancelled each time. Over the summer there was a guy found hanging from a tree on the sheriff's property. The sheriff disliked this young man and treated him poorly during his incarceration at the county jail. Many witnesses said that the day he got released from jail, the sheriff invited him to his secluded property and told him he could help him get back on his feet. 2 days later, a couple of teenage boys fishing in a creek discovered the guy hanging in a tree. Authorities was notified. No investigation was done, and it was immediately ruled a suicide. This boy was a known drug addict with no family or friends, so there was really no one to press the issue. The local news wrote a small article on man found dead from apparent suicide and then it was hush hush after that. It's just one of those things we will never know. The doctor who tried all these wacky treatments to save his young patient from tuberculosis and became infatuated with her. After she died he eventually robbed her grave, mummified her and lived with her body for 7 years before being found out. Did not go to jail and lived his years out in town, I believe. Colt Hansler and Eleanor DeHoos. That story is one of few true crime ones I've read that kept me up at night. In Mom's seaside hometown, there's a decommissioned lighthouse offshore. Even though utilities to the lighthouse have long been disconnected and the building locked, residents have noticed the beacon turn on at late hours of the night, just for a few minutes, then mysteriously grow dark again. It happens so infrequently that the time of illumination can't be predicted. As I once described here, no one has figured out how or why this happens. I've always wanted to live in a decommissioned lighthouse, and there would be a button I could press that would send the lighthouse into space. Have any people been strangely obsessed with spirals in town lately? Well, we had the 32-year-old son of a prominent member of town rape and sodomize a 14-year-old girl. Notable quotes from the kangaroo court. She was begging for it. You see the tits on that one? How was I supposed to know? She didn't try real hard to stop anything. Anyways, he got off with a slap on the wrist. 2 weeks later, he was found by cleaning staff in the local gym, beaten with a wooden broom handle shoved up his ass. Rumor was that it was a group of guys from the high school that jumped him after another chick lured him there. Honestly, a lot of people know who did it, but no one breathed a word. He survived, but left the area and basically just disappeared. This gives me a justice boner. Edit. I know an eye for an eye isn't the answer, but the justice system failed in this case. The people took it into their own hands. Is that so bad? Please subscribe if you liked the video. It really helps the channel to grow. Adios.